r/no sleep, posted by Reddit user RichardSaxon. We have been stationed on the moon since 1988. There's a reason it's been kept a secret. Part 5. There will come a time when the last word is spoken by the last human left alive, a moment heard by none, to be forgotten by time itself. There will come a time where love dies and the last heart stops beating, one final embrace before death takes us apart, and one last kiss to say goodbye. Humanity, for all of its worth, will perish like so many other species before us. We will fight it tooth and nail, but no matter what the case, our time will eventually come. There will come a time where all hope seems lost, but we will not give up, because our lives, and the lives of those we love, are worth fighting for. As we prepared for our last mission, I recounted the events of the past day. Something about the situation didn't sit right with me. We'd been monitoring the oncoming invasion for the past 50 years, yet we'd completely missed the imminent arrival. It doesn't make any sense, I whispered to myself, forgetting everything would be broadcast to the others. What doesn't? Jennifer asked. Their numbers. We counted, 150 signatures aboard Ares? A weirdly small force that arrived 5 years ahead of schedule. How do you explain that? The ship we detected back in 1970 was the size of the entire United States, but it's not here. What are you saying? Daniel chimed in. What if this is just a scout party? What if the main invasion is still 5 years away? If they're all confined within Ares, and we blow it up, it should give us enough time to make it to Earth, and warn them. My words, though meant to comfort, hardly brightened the mood. If a scout party took out the best we had to fight them, I'm afraid we're utterly fucked, Jennifer responded. At least we know how they operate. If anything, I'd say that's the best advantage we could possibly have gotten. We need to make it back to Earth, I said. It was a simple enough plan in theory, but even if we managed to blow up Ares, it wouldn't ensure that every single alien died in the blast. So, the last resort? What is it? Daniel asked. You know how Nikola Tesla worked on the wireless transfer of electricity? Jennifer said. Daniel nodded. Well, it's like that, except weaponized. It was supposed to be a device that irreversibly damaged the electrical systems by overcharging them. Harmless to people, but it could render any enemy station useless. Unfortunately, it has the side effect of blowing everything to pieces, so we've repurposed it as a measure of the last resort, should anything take over Ares. Better than killing everyone with nukes, I suppose. Don't worry, we have those too, but let's not kill ourselves while we still stand a chance, I shot back. In the end, we knew at least one of us had to escape, to get a warning out to Earth. If we could kill any of these bastards in the process, well, that was just a bonus. Before we could fire the weapon, we'd need to restore the factory's power. Jennifer would take that task, and head for the basement. Once there, she could redirect any power from the neighboring stations, and funnel it into the last resort. In the meantime, Daniel and I would climb the observation tower, from where the last resort could be controlled. Once activated, and Ares had been destroyed, we could retreat to the main hangar, and pray that any of escape shuttles still remained functional. Fuck it, let's not die today, Daniel said. Once we leave this room, we cannot communicate anymore. Should they hijack our channels, we're done for. We need to maintain total radio silence for the next few hours, no matter what happens, I ordered. They nodded, and quickly turned off their radios. It was time to re-enter the silent vacuum outside. No sooner had I turned my own radio off, before I regretted not speaking any word of comfort. For all I knew, these could have been our last words ever spoken. We left the control room, equipped with little more than a paper and pen. Jennifer instantly ran to the lower levels, while Daniel and I headed for the elevator that led up towards the observation tower. With the power mostly out, the elevator didn't run, which meant we had to move up the ladder within the shaft itself. It was an exhausting climb despite the lower gravity. We made slow progress, but determined to save ourselves and Earth, we eventually got there. Daniel gave me a look, not knowing what to do. His face was wet from sweat, both from nervousness and exhaustion. I gave him a basic set of instructions. Just which switches should be on and which off. He diligently followed orders while I started to reprogram the weapon. While its basic functions were active, we had to wait for Jennifer to turn the power back on before we could initiate the firing sequence. Half an hour quickly passed, and I started to get nervous. Another 10 minutes and I was about ready to go looking for her. As I jotted down an explanation to Daniel, I noticed one of the lights turn on, alerting us the power had returned. Without hesitation, we started the firing sequence and counted down the seconds until activation. Even from the observation tower, we could just barely see the peak of Ares, a place where hundreds of great lives and trillions of unimportant dollars had been lost. It had all been for nothing. Then, the weapon finally charged. "Ready?" I wrote down on a piece of paper. He nodded, and we fired the weapon. For a moment, I feared that Ares was too rid of oxygen to ignite in the blast, but these doubts were quickly stifled as a massive explosion emerged over the horizon. Tons of debris shot up from the moon's surface, powerful enough to escape orbit. A few seconds later, the ground beneath us rumbled. Shock waves couldn't travel through a vacuum, but the explosion itself had been enough to shake the ground. "Holy fuck," I could see Daniel mouth silently. I attempted to scan Ares for identifiable heat signatures and radio signals, but in the wake of the explosion, I could only get static-like image that proved to be impossible to read. There was no way to know how many aliens survived the explosion, but I know that whatever was left, they'd be heading straight for us. We evacuated the tower. Luckily, the elevator had been activated alongside the rest of the station, meaning we didn't have to climb down. It was a minor victory, but it came with a downside of re-establishing the atmosphere. With that power returned, we knew it was only a matter of time before the generators down in the basement produced an effective atmosphere. Soon, we'd be able to breathe in here. By all measurable metrics, time was running out. The hangar in the factory was filled with experimental vehicles, most only used for local travel, and none helpful in our escape. Despite that, the factory was equipped with several escape shuttles, 2 of which were still docked. Back on Earth, common fuel only has a shelf life of about 3 to 6 months. Kerosene fuel, on the other hand, can last years without degrading, and the factory had plenty of it. Once we got down there, I started the fueling process. Still, Jennifer was nowhere in sight. Once the process of refueling had started, I took to a control panel and scanned for any signs of life in the vicinity. In the distance, only a mile away, I could see dozens of creatures approaching us. "Fuck!" I shouted, the words only echoing within my own suit. We still needed an hour to fuel, and based on the invaders' speed, they'd be here just shy of that. The hour slowly ticked down, and by each passing minute, our deaths approached. I couldn't risk waiting any longer, so I signaled for Daniel to stay put while I went to search for Jennifer. Based on her signature, I tracked her to a basement of the factory, running around erratically. I rushed through the dimly lit halls, slowly starting to hear the echo of my own footsteps. By then, the atmosphere was almost fully restored. The basement was a massive room, filled with generators converting moon dust to breathable oxygen. Jennifer was moving from generator to generator, deactivating them in an attempt to stopping the air from being produced. She wasn't even wearing a helmet anymore. I approached her, noticing that each pillar next to the generator had been mounted with explosive charges. "We need to stop them," she shouted as she noticed my presence. I took my own helmet off, letting in a breath of stale air. "We're about to leave. Come on." "It's too late. They're almost here. We need to bring the station down with us." I glanced at the charges, noticing a timer slowly ticking down. Within the next half hour, the station would blow, and unless we could escape, it would be disintegrated with it. How did you even find these? I used to work here, remember? Now put your helmet back on. I'm about to evacuate the air from this place. With that, the atmosphere once again vanished, and we were plunged into everlasting silence. We left the basement and rushed back to the shuttle, which was still 10 minutes away from being ready. As I prepared the craft, the others stood in uncomfortable silence. We all knew that the station could be run over at any moment. Yet, we had no weapons, nor numbers to fight back with. I glanced over at the control panel, the blips on the radar growing even closer. Then we felt it, the station shaking as the first set of doors blew open, and we were still not ready to leave. We looked at each other, doubt and fear on all our faces. Then, another shake. As a second set of doors were breached, they were getting closer. In less than 5 minutes, they'd be upon us. How long? Jennifer jotted down on the paper. I held up my hand, showing that we still needed 5 more minutes before we could launch. I looked at the door, wondering when it would blow open, and the monstrosities would barge in to end us. I knew what had to be done. Someone had to lead them away from the hangar, trick them into another part of the station. As I turned around, I saw Daniel inside the shuttle detaching a portable radio from its dashboard. He'd made the same realization as myself, and was going to sacrifice himself. I tried taking it from him, but he pushed me away and rushed for the doors. Before they closed, I could see him flick on the radio, creating a mess of radio signals that would attract the aliens. Since it wasn't the one built into his suit, they wouldn't be able to control him. He started running in the opposite direction of the hangar, and the aliens followed diligently. Jennifer and I boarded the shuttle hesitantly, and immediately got it running. She pointed back in the direction Daniel had run, but it was pointless. He'd given us an opportunity, and if we didn't take it, we'd perish along with them. We shot through the evacuation tunnel, garnering enough speed to easily escape the moon's weak and unstable gravity. Even then, we couldn't speak until the oxygen levels rose within the shuttle. All we could do was stare out the window and wait for the charges to detonate. There couldn't be much of a blast to speak of, without oxygen to carry the fire. The station simply collapsed as the beams evaporated, killing anything still within. Daniel had saved our lives, and taken down what remained of the scout party in the process. Once at a safe distance, we finally removed our helmets, but kept the radio off. "We made it," Jennifer said with a somber tone of voice. It was a bittersweet victory, and I let out a sigh of both sadness and relief. We'd failed to protect Earth, and Harry's had already been taken out by a simple scout party. It was only thanks to the heroism of a fallen friend that we were given a chance to warn Earth. We survived the first wave, but as previously suspected, a much larger force will reach us within the next 5 years. With current technologies, and the multiple wars we fight amongst ourselves back on Earth, we don't stand a chance. This will be our last stand, and the only hope of victory we have is to stand together as one.